Hey everybody, Skeleton here, and today we have a bunch of new fan-made cards created by Cold that we're going to go ahead and review for Hearthstone. Of course, like I said, these are fan-made, not real, but it might be a fun change of pace to, look at them and review them. Given that the Grand Tournament, honestly, it had some good cards, but a lot of it was rubbish. In any case, we're going to go ahead and get started with this. Now, there are a few new card effect types that he included with these cards. One is Ghost. So these cards labeled Ghost have effects, at least I think they do, where they might summon a ghost. Now, a ghost is a 0/2/0 mana creature. At the start of your turn, deal 1 damage to your hero. So these cards, as far as I saw from previewing them, typically summon them for your opponent, so your opponent will take damage each turn, though obviously you could use it in conjunction with something like Flame Tongue Totem and churn these ghosts against your opponent. So if like Ghost ever became a meta, I think Shaman would be pretty good. Then there are also these cards that while you have at least 4 unspent mana, you might get a bonus effect. For instance, this first card, the Ancient Moonkin, is a 6/6 for 6. Gains 3 attack while you have 4 unspent mana, which would make it a 9/6, which is actually pretty crazy in terms of stats. Now, it's much easier to have 4 unspent mana at the start of your turn than it is to have it at the end of your turn carrying over to your opponent's turn. So at the start of your turn, pretty much all the time, it's going to be a 9/6. But it'll only be a 9/6 on your opponent's turn if you deliberately choose to pass with 4 mana remaining. So that's actually kind of an interesting mechanic. Do you want to pass with the extra mana floating just so that your creature can become more powerful for the next turn? And that kind of reminds me of Magic the Gathering, honestly, because there are cards in that game where at any point in time you can just pay extra mana that you're floating to get special effects. Like one card is Azure Mage. It's a really weak minion, like a 2/1, costs 2 or 3 mana to bring out onto the field. But at any time you can pay 4 mana in order to draw a card, even if it's on your opponent's turn. So this is kind of that same floating mana to get extra bonus effects kind of thing. As far as the Ancient Moonkin, well, I would think like a Moonkin should probably be a beast. I guess not really, because they're sort of humanoid. Though I wouldn't blame them if they made that a thing. Now 9/6 on your opponent's turn. That's pretty decent stats. Would you play it though? That's kind of questionable. In some ways I think a Bolt of Fist Ogre would kind of be better, because in most cases, like, the 3 attack is only going to matter when you're pushing for damage. So, and pushing for damage with big 6 drops, you don't really play aggressively with minions that cost that high. So really, it's more or less a glorified 6/6, and a 6/7 isn't good enough to play, so you probably wouldn't play it unless it was Arena. Then it would be pretty good, actually. So we'll just hit next in this new Windows 10 photo viewer instead of clicking here. So the next card, Friendly Moonkin, kind of another Moonkin that you got going on there. A 3 mana, 2/4, pretty standard stats, while has +1/+1 while you have at least 4 unspent mana. So this would actually become a 3/5 if you're going to float the extra mana, which is kind of hard to do when you're running a card that's actually this low on the mana curve. If you dropped it later into the game and you only had a couple cards in your hand, yeah, I guess you'd get some extra value out of it. But, a situational 3/5 that 4 unspent mana on your opponent's turn is actually really hard to do or justify. So, really to call it a 3/5 is ridiculous. It's not even really worth 1 extra stat over a 2/4, in my opinion. Unless you're talking about your turn. Now, it does depend a little bit on the interaction, because it'll become a 3/5 on your turn when you play this on turn 3. I think the question would be, does the +1 HP heal the guy if he's already taken damage? So if he turns into a 2/2 because your opponent ran into it, then it becomes a 3/3 on your turn? Does it stay like a 2/3 after your turn ends? Because then that would be not actually too bad, because it would be like it's healing 1 every turn. But if it doesn't work like that, kind of iffy. Maybe it's better in practice than I think it is, because it would pretty much always be a 3 attack minion on your turn. but will pretty much always be a 2/4 on your opponent's turn. So, interesting. I'm not sure it's actually good. Worth experimenting with, though. Okay, next up, Mana Absorber. 3 mana, and this is a Shaman background, epic, so a 3/3 for 3. Can't be targeted by spells or hero powers while you have at least 4 unspent mana. Okay, now, can't be targeted by spells or hero powers is a pretty decent effect. You got, like, the Lich King Knight, or Knight of Northrend, or something like that. The 4/6 that costs 5 mana. And that card is actually considered really good in Arena. Fairy Dragon also considered pretty good in Arena as a 3/2 that has the same effect, except that those are always active. They don't require you to float for unspent mana. And this is only really useful when you're talking about your opponent's turn. So coming into your turn with the ability to not be targeted is irrelevant, because they can't target your minions. It's not Magic where they can play an instant at the start of your turn. You would literally have to float 4 mana. And that's really hard to do. In my opinion, for a card effect that's this hard to pass, this should be at least a 3/4, honestly. Because a 3/3 would never get played for this kind of effect. 4 unspent mana is really hard to trigger. Gotta keep that in mind, and that card effect just doesn't justify it. Even if this was can't be targeted by spells or hero powers as a vanilla 3 mana 3/3, it wouldn't be played. A 3/3 is just not good enough unless it does something huge. Okay, next up, Mana Lust Sabercat. 1 mana 1/1, better have a good effect. Has +2/+1 while you have at least 4 unspent mana. So that's interesting, because at the start of your turn, if it's past turn 3, so it's turn 4 later, this becomes a 3/2, 1 mana drop, but the problem is you generally play 1 drops in the first 3 turns. That's what you aim for. So you're never going to have 4 unspent mana, and you're definitely not going to have 4 unspent mana on your opponent's turn. So all they need to do to remove this is to Fire Blast it. If you play it in an aggressive deck, it's not even going to do what a Leper Gnome would do, because a Leper Gnome guaranteed at least 1 extra damage, 2 extra damage automatically. And in many cases, this is just going to be a 1/1. Cases I could see it being okay would be as if you have a way to charge it, and you're already floating a lot of mana, so it's like turn 10, and then somehow this becomes a charge minion. Or another thing you could do with it maybe is to Crazed Alchemist it and flip the stats, and then I believe the +2/+1 would apply again, and that could be interesting, because then that would become a let's see, okay, so 2/3 and then +2/+1. That would become a 4/4 as long as you still had unspent mana, which is interesting. I don't think that's good enough to be played, even though it's a beast. So yeah, pretty much pass on that one. But interesting, just probably bad. Kind of like a Brave Archer. That's what it makes me think of a little bit. Okay, Obsidian Bow has +2 attack while you have at least 4 unspent mana. 5 mana, 3/3 weapon. Okay, this card is probably really strong. The turn you play it, it's going to be a 3/3. So you'll hit a minion for 3 damage, and then at the start of all of your future turns, you're obviously going to have 4 unspent mana, which will make it a 5/2 that you get to hit 2 more times with. So in total, it's generally going to be 13 weapon damage and 3 durability for 5 mana. And that's really good. It's almost like a Death Spite with another charge for 1 extra mana. And I think that would be worth it. 5 damage straight up. Arguably a little bit better than, the 4 damage. Having a weak first attack, okay, that's a little bit of a limitation. But in general, I think that is just a very, very strong Hunter card. If this was released, would probably go in any mid-range deck. Maybe too high mana cost for Face Hunter, but any mid-range deck, yeah, I think that would be in there. You could put out a lot of damage with that. You could make a lot of minion face-to-minion trades, and that's just a pretty good weapon, honestly. Okay, next up, Dark Apprentice. Death Rattle, summon a ghost for your opponent. Okay, so we're getting into those ghost cards. A 2/1 for 2 mana. Yeah, okay. If this was a 1 mana card, that would be kind of scary, having a Death Rattle like that. So, this ghost on your opponent's side of the field, it's going to keep dealing 1 damage over time. So, it's like a Leper Gnome that's going to... maybe hit your opponent for an extra 4 damage or 5 damage. They probably don't want to silence this unless they really have to. So over time, that ghost will deal some damage. Of course, the ghost, once again, 1 damage to your hero at the start of every turn. The problem is, that's living in the dream world. The dream world where you're playing against a class that has no way to activate that ghost and turn it against you. If you could guarantee that the ghost isn't going to be used against you and is just going to take up a slot on their field permanently, then that would be pretty good. But, you know, you're running into Blessing of Might, Mark of Nature, Savage Roar, Direwolf Alphas, Knife Juggler 2 to an extent, Abusive Sergeants, Dark Iron Dwarves. There's quite a few activators out there. Hell, even Priests have Felons Chosen. So the number of classes where you'd really punish them with the ghost, I don't think that's actually that crazy high. Maybe it will be decent against mages, but maybe all this would do is actually encourage people to start running activators. You know, if ghosts were really a big threat, people would just activate the ghosts and use it against you. So this is actually a weak card. Yeah, I think this is too weak to play, honestly. Even though the potential for dealing a lot of damage is there, it's weak. Okay, Cormac. Summon 2 ghosts for your opponent as a 6/7 for 7 mana. Okay, Battle Cry is a little better than a Death Rattle, and that is 2 ghosts. In the dream scenario, you could prevent your opponent from playing any extra minions because they have ghosts flooding the field. Or you could even use it, you know, to punish them for having too many minions on the field, like with Unleash the Hounds. Though I don't think you'd play this in a Hunter deck, honestly. It's always a Boulder Fist Ogre with the Battle Cry. Is the Battle Cry worth 1 mana? In some cases, yeah, it is. But, you know, it does carry that risk. I don't know if the ghosts are really enough to justify that. This could maybe be 6 mana, honestly, and still have that Battle Cry. Because remember, Boulder Fist Ogre isn't played at all. Even though it's a pretty solid, fair card, it just doesn't keep up with the current meta and the strength of the Grand Tournament cards and Goblins versus Gnomes cards. At 7 mana, this would never be played. At 6 mana, it's more of an interesting consideration. Because remember, the ghosts can be equally a drawback as much as they can be a benefit for you. So I don't know, maybe the ghosts shouldn't actually have a mana cost associated with them. Maybe it should just be like, it's a 6/7 for 6 mana. That gives you the Battle Cry, but the Battle Cry can be good and bad, so we're going to make it net neutral, and you'd really have to make a deck that plays around that fact and really abuses the fact you're putting ghosts in your opponent's field. Okay, Master Necromancer. Death Rattle, summon a ghost for your opponent, 6/7, 8 mana. Same thing here. You wouldn't play the Legendary for 7 mana. You definitely wouldn't play this for 8 mana for that Death Rattle effect. It's way too weak. Even at 6 mana, I think this might be kind of weak, too weak to play. Unless I'm missing something. Maybe there's some cards over here that really let you punish them for having ghosts. Let's see. Saloon Summoner. 5/4 for 6 mana. Whenever an enemy minion dies, summon a ghost for your opponent. Okay. Because of this card's ability to like flood your opponent's field dramatically with ghosts, maybe there would be something to a card like this. I think you could make it 5 mana still, because it's hard to pull off that effect. 6 mana, it would be really hard to make a deck that justifies this. At 5 mana, though, I think that's more interesting. Because that does sound like an abusable effect, and that could justify making a 5/4 for 5 mana. Sort of like the Recruiter from the Grand Tournament. It's a 5/4, Inspire, add a 2/2 Squire to your hand. That's not even run, but that is kind of an abusable mechanic. And in the same way, this could be kind of an abusable mechanic, but at 5 mana, not 6. Maybe even at 4 mana. Nah, 4 is kind of pushing it. I'd say 5. Maybe as a 5/5 for 5 mana. That would be fair. Okay, next up. 4 mana, Vengeful Mage, 3/3. Summon a ghost for your opponent. Same problem, too high mana cost, too weak. Even as a 3/3 for 3 mana, I think that would be hard to justify. And, you know, maybe I'm undervaluing the ghosts. maybe giving your opponent a free 0/2 is better than I think it is. But, you know, Defender of Argus, Abusive Sergeant, Felon's Chosen, I just, you're going to get punished so hard for this with so many classes. And that's without people even changing their current decks, just running what they do already in the current meta. Given that I'm basing all of this on the current meta and haven't really seen the other cards yet, but the Ghost concept seems weak without anything else to back it up. Okay, so these are going to be getting into the Ulduar cards a bit, and I mentioned to Cold, like, hey, what would be cool for him to do? He asked me, and I told him, how about Ulduar? That was actually one of my favorite raids from WoW. I only really ever did 5 or 6 in my WoW career, but Ulduar was one of them, and I did enjoy Ulduar. So, Alagon the Observer, one of the bosses I didn't actually get to because that was a really big raid. But a 10 mana 9/9 can't attack. Whenever your hero takes damage, put a random minion into your hand. Interesting. Really bizarre effect, and I think that kind of effect does belong in a legendary. So the potential for card draw is crazy, but is that good enough to play? You know, I feel like it's going to kind of have the Varian Wren effect to a degree. Varian Wren, you look at that 7/7 for 10 mana that lets you draw 3 and put those minions into the battlefield, and it's like crazy value, right? But that's in a control versus control matchup. You know, in practice, I haven't even seen Varian be that good that many times. Good in theory, but, you know, not that hard to punish, because it does cost 10 mana. Can't attack is a really big drawback. And yeah, I get the idea is, oh, well, your opponent will see that, and they'll be so scared of giving you minions that they'll have to fight this guy. But honestly, more likely it's just going to get Shadowwood Death to BGH'd if it's that big of a threat. Or your opponent's just going to schmork your face and you're dead anyway, regardless of how many cards you draw. It's a threat against control decks, but control decks will have the answer. And, you know, if you play a 10 mana card against a control deck, that might even be too slow. Ysera oftentimes is too slow, even against control decks. Like, your opponent's got 2 Molten Giants because they're handlock, and you play Ysera, you might just die. Or they Siphon Soul you and you're wrecked. So I don't think this would be viable. Maybe give it Taunt, or I feel like it needs some other kind of effect for it to be worth it. Like a 9/9 Taunt, then like your opponent can't even hero power your face. They have to go through it. Maybe something like that. I don't know if Taunt is where you really want to go with it. Maybe like gives you a random minion to your hand and heals your hero by 2 HP. Then it's like your opponent can't even justify dealing damage to your face, because it's just going to give you so much value. Something like that anyway. You're just going to get rushed down if you play this, or it's going to get BGH'd by a control deck. So it's not really as viable. But the effect is cool. I'll give it that. Okay, Arcane Guardian, 6/7 Taunt, Battle Cry. Give your opponent a mana crystal for 5 mana. Oh, that's pretty cool, you know. I think this is actually a pretty strong minion, because at turn 5 or past turn 5, the ramp isn't going to matter as much, because it's like, play it on turn 7, okay, so they're going to get like 8 mana on their turn, and it's like, they got an extra mana, big whoop. Exceptions to that rule might be like against a druid because combo, but a 5/7 is a big wall to put in front of people. That also applies to patron. Like a patron can execute it, but what if they've already burned that execute? A 6/7's pretty tough to get through. So I think if this card was added, it could be a justifiable card in many decks, and it's an interesting alternative to Sludge Belcher. It might even be on the really, really strong side. I could see this maybe being a 5/7 and even being playable. As a 6/7, it's possibly competitive. Would be interesting to see how that turns out. Could you get punished that hard for giving people an extra mana crystal? If you play it on turn 5, probably. But in most cases, you don't have to play the Sludge Belcher exactly on turn 5. Anyway, neat. Okay, Arrow Volley. 4 mana, deal 2 damage to all enemies without enemy minions without stealth. So it's like a Consecration that's Wars because it doesn't damage your opponent's face and it doesn't hit stealth minions. I think in most cases you would want it to hit stealth minions. So now given stealth minions are really a small component, most people don't really run that many stealth minions. Exception maybe being Druid with Shade of Naxxramas. That's a big target. So this would be like a basic card for control hunters. I think it's kind of fair, mediocre. You know, Consecration isn't even run in every single Paladin deck, and especially not necessarily a 2 of in every single Paladin deck, especially the aggro ones, the Super Cancer Boladin decks. This would be kind of hard to justify. I feel like Power Shot's just better than this. As a 3 mana, pick a target, deal 2 damage to that minion and the 2 adjacent minions. So it feels like a weaker Power Shot. Not too many cases where you're too worried about your opponent getting, 7 minions on the field. And if they did, that's what you have Knife Juggler and Unleash the Hounds for, to absolutely wreck them. So it's just outclassed by other cards. Okay, next up, Atrocious Amalgamation. Okay, that's a mouthful. 4 mana, 1/6. Gets +4 attack while you're holding a dragon. Alright, kind of makes me think of the 3/6 that gains extra attack, the Fire Guard Destroyer that Shamans have, which is a fair card. Sometimes sees a little bit of play. It's really good in Arena. This obviously is played in a dragon deck, would become a 5/6, which is quite powerful. And it's guaranteed 5/6. It doesn't sometimes become a 7/6 where it can get BGH'd, which is one of the downsides of a Fire Guard Destroyer. Does require you to hold a dragon, though that's not too hard to pull off in dragon decks. Like, a Dragon Priest is fairly consistent. Sometimes it misfires, but probably 80% of the time if you play the deck right, you can guarantee you can hold a dragon. So that would probably be a pretty good card for dragon decks, I think. Is it out of the question to play that? 5/6 is a little bit strong. Maybe fair. I could see it as a 4/6 too. Maybe like as a 2/6 that gets +2 attack while you're holding a dragon. Seems a little less polarized to me. Okay, anyway. Next up, Bird of Prey. 4 mana, 3/1. Battlecry, destroy your opponent's weapon. Shuffle a copy of it into your deck. Well, I thought I was going to say your opponent's deck. That's actually neat. That's pretty neat. I don't necessarily know if it has to be a 1 health minion. That's really pushing it in the weak side, because like Starving Buzzard has a strong effect, but it costs 5 mana now, so no one would ever play it. I think it's like a 3/3 or something. This could even be played. I mean, in 3/3, this wouldn't be super OP, because remember, targeting an opponent's weapon does require, for one thing, for them to be playing a weapon class, and this would be just a really weak card against any kind of non-weapon deck, unless you're going to play Blingtron 4000, which would be an interesting turn 9 sort of control play, I guess. Just take whatever weapon you give them and put it in your deck. Though I really doubt that would be good enough to justify it. The thing is, you could pay 1 more mana and just play Harrison Jones, which is a 5/4, and you draw a card immediately. Sometimes more cards if their weapon has multiple durability. I think Harrison Jones is just straight up better. And I think even that has fallen out of the meta recently, because weapons haven't been quite as big of a deal, necessarily, and it's kind of slow to play them. So I like the Battlecry, but I think this card's too weak. 1 mana is just really, really weak. No one plays Magma Rager. And this is 1 more mana than a Magma Rager and doesn't even have the 5 attack it does. So the stats are too weak. The Battlecry is overvalued. This, this could be like a 2 mana minion almost with that kind of stats. Make it better stats, and then we're talking. Okay, Battlecry. If you're holding a dragon, draw a card, 4 mana, 4/4. I kind of like that effect. because one thing, benefits dragon decks more. Secondly, it gives you the ability to draw a card with the dragon without having to play Azure Drake. Because Azure Drake is a really strong card, but not every deck actually needs the spell damage. Like, many priest decks, Dragon Priest currently runs Holy Nova, but many priest decks don't really run any spells that actually need the spell damage. So, conditionally just being able to draw a card without having to worry about spell damage, that would be a lot better for something like Dragon Warrior, for instance. So, that's actually a pretty fair card. Pretty neat. I like it. Okay, next up. Brutal Dreadlord. Your other demons have +1 attack. 5 mana, 5/3, 4 demons. Very similar to the Paladin minion, the Warhorse Trainer that just came out. 2, 4, 3 mana. Give your Silverhand Recruits +1 attack. That card is too weak to play in Arena, to play in Constructed rather, and so is this one, especially considering the stat lineup. 3 health on a 5 mana minion is really weak, and +1 attack just, it's probably not enough to justify that. Yeah, I get you could Implosion and then play this on the next turn, but A, that's living in a dream world, and B, so you have 2/1 imps. Meh. Or you could just play Direwolf Alpha. I think this card is too weak. I would just play Direwolf Alpha instead. The 3 mana, the 3 health on it, it's just going to get eradicated. This could easily be a 5/5 for 5, I think. Or at least a 4/5 for 5. Okay, next up, 7 mana, 6/6 mech. Chicken Transmutator. Whenever a minion dies, put an angry chicken into your hand. I love the idea of adding angry chickens into the game, bringing them back into the meta, not that they were ever meta. If you're not familiar with the angry chicken, it's a 1 mana, 1/1 beast, rare from the vanilla set, that if somehow you get it to enrage, which requires it to have less than its full health, and remember it has only 1 HP, so that means you have to buff it up first, it enrages for +5 health. So, very similar to the Mechatork Thermoplug, I think that's his name, where when an enemy minion dies, you get a Lepronome. Now this is when a minion dies, you get an angry chicken in your hand. Those Lepronomes come out on the field, but that's a 9/7 for 9 mana, which is never played. Angry chicken to your hand is pretty weak, though, you know, there are situations you could use it, like with a Hobgoblin deck. 3/3 angry chickens become a lot more threatening because those can enrage for a ton of damage, and you could just whirlwind them, you know. Entire board of like 8 or like 6 or 7 8/2 angry chickens is ridiculous, but also possible, though that would probably go into a Trollden video. I'm not sure how you can make this viable, but I think it's a pretty fun card. I'd play around with it a bit. And it's a mech too, so something to be said there. Probably not viable, same way as Mechatork Thermoplug isn't viable. Okay, Chromie, 4 mana, 3/3 dragon. Your dragons cost 2 less. I think this somewhat suffers from the Aviana sickness. Aviana is a 9 mana 5/5 for druids, the new legendary that just came out, which makes all your minions cost 1. Given you can't really play that many minions when your Aviana costs 9 mana, but you can combo it with Emperor Tharzan or Innovate and get a lot of stuff out onto the board, but Aviana hasn't made it to any viable decks. I think this would be a little bit, maybe a little bit better, because it's a 4 mana minion, which means the requirements for it being usable aren't nearly as high. There's some decent 2 mana dragons and 1 mana dragons, like Twilight Whelp for priests, like Fairy Dragon for any dragon deck. It's not great, but it's okay. It's an option. So you could play those out of your hand immediately. That's true. But let's say you have bigger dragons than that, like Twilight Guardian, a 4 mana minion, becomes a 2 mana minion, and you got to play Chromie on turn 4. Chromie's just going to die. It's going to get War Axed, which is super value for the warrior. Or True Silver Championed, which kind of sucks, but I mean, that happens to a lot of 4-drops anyway. And I think this is a fair card. I don't know if it's super OP. it would be kind of like saying Mech Warper is OP, because, oh, you can get those 0 mana Clockwork Gnomes out. Meh? I mean, yeah, if you flood the board, though, you just get punished really hard for it by some kind of AoE. I feel the same kind of thing would happen in some kind of super aggro dragon deck, but this card would enable something like that kind of play. You get some aggressive dragons. Maybe it could be a thing. Or with Emperor Tharzan, though. That would be crazy, actually. Emperor Tharzan, 3 mana chromie, all your dragons cost 2 less. I think a late game combo dragon. Okay, yeah, maybe there's more to this card than I give it credit for. It's a pretty good effect. Okay, Corrupted Hippogriff. Hippogriff. 5 mana, 4/3. Ew, those stats, though. Inspire, deal 2 damage to a non-beast minion. Okay, so when I think that, I would think like Fell Cannon, because it's targeting Fell Cannon targets anything that's not a mech, and it doesn't do it as an Inspire effect, it's just at the end of your turn. This is a 4/3. Fell Cannon is a 3/5 that is never played, mostly because Mech Warlock just isn't a thing. Otherwise, it actually would be a pretty good card. I think the stats are too weak here. Yeah, in a beast deck, it would only target enemy minions. Though, you know, that's kind of like King Mukla, not King Mukla, but Mukla's champion, or whichever, no, not Mukla's champion. Or is it Mukla's champion? Whichever one gives the bananas. I think that is Mukla's champion. Which is never played in Constructed, but is actually decent in Arena. I think this is one of those cards. Like, Inspire just has been really weak in TGT. This does have the same stat lineup as the Mukla's champion thing, the Banana Giver. 2 damage as an Inspire effect. Isn't that insane? Because it's random. Oh, wait, no, it's not random. Okay, that's a little bit better than I thought then. Yeah, in Arena you could probably play it in Constructed. I think it would be hard to get the dream where you play it on turn 7 and then you deal 2 damage. And even if you did, dealing 2 damage is an Inspire. It's like, whoop-de-doo. It's a subpar version of a Keeper of the Grove. This requires 7 mana, gives you 4/3, and Keeper gives you a 2/4 for 4 mana. And, yeah, it doesn't even have to be a non-beast. It's just anything you want. Oh, or you could use a silence. It's more versatile, too. So, too weak for Constructed. Well, at least thinking about it from the Druid perspective. But I don't think there's a class where this would be super good. Okay, Crimson Terror Fiend. 6 mana, 5/4. Death Rattle. Add a Demon Wrath to your hand. Alright, 5/4 with card draw. Yeah, what I would compare it to would be like the Grand Crusader, which is a 5/5 for 6 mana, neutral minion. It gives you a random Paladin card. The difference is this has 1 less HP, but gives you a very specific card. And you know, getting extra Demon Wraths... Demon Wrath actually is a pretty decent card in a demon deck if you can fit it in. Doesn't exactly work in Zoo because Zoo runs non-demons and is more just about controlling the board with minions. But like a mid-range demon deck, I think could justifiably, you know, include a Demon Wrath somewhere. Because it deals 2 damage to all non-demons, which is good for activating Nerubian Eggs and also good for just blowing your opponent's stuff up and keeping your board alive, unlike Hellfire. This would be worth considering playing in very specific demon decks, so I think that's fair. You could probably make this a 5/5 and it not being overboard. Because the random Paladin card is also pretty good, you know, getting those True Silvers or maybe getting an Avenge card or a Lay on Hands. Paladin has some really good cards, and Demon Wrath isn't the best Warlock card, but it is pretty good in a demon deck. Okay, next up, Deep Lake Murloc. A 3 mana, 3/2, give all other Murlocs +2 attack as battle cry. That's pretty sick, actually. Given, you know, if you have a field of Murlocs, this is pretty much like playing a Bloodlust. And I think some Murloc decks actually run Bloodlust. So this would maybe replace Bloodlust in Murloc decks specifically. And that would be pretty good. 3 mana, 2 attack Bloodlust. It's pretty much like a Savage Roar that also gives you a 3/2 Murloc. And that's really good if you're playing specifically that deck. And cards like this, you know, could maybe make Murloc Shaman just a little bit more viable. And it just needs a little bit more to push it into really being good. I mean, like if you watch a Thane stream a little bit, I know he's not like the most serious Hearthstone player, but he has gotten Legend. And I think he's played Legend with Murloc decks quite a few times. And yeah, you don't want to give Murlocs too many tools because they're already not that bad. Okay, next up. Devouring Plague, 4 mana. Deal 3 to 6 damage, restore health to your hero equal to the damage dealt. So it's basically a lot like a Holy, what's it called? Holy Fire, which is a 6 mana, deal 5 damage, heal 5. I think it's 6 mana anyway. Or could it be 5? There's a big difference between a 5 and a 6 mana. Anyway, this is a lot like that, except it's random damage. Admittedly, Crackle would be insane if it hit for 6 every turn, for every time for 2 mana, overload 1. This has no overload, so it's like a 3 mana Crackle, except you're paying an extra mana for the healing. I think this is a fair card to consider playing. You know, Malygos Priest, having extra cards that actually benefit from spell damage, that's a nice thing for Priest. Because right now, Priest is pretty much Mind Blast, Holy Smite, and Holy Nova. And I think that's pretty much it from the spells perspective. So they do need more damaging spells, I do feel. So this would be actually a pretty fair addition to the class. And give Priest a little bit more of that RNG. Though Priests already do have some RNG with like Thoughtsteel. But I would enjoy seeing a card like this added to the Priest set. And could even be running aggro priests, actually. Good against aggro hunters, because, you know, healing for that damage will be important, so you can just delay one more turn so you can draw the card to finish them off. Neat card. Okay, next up, Disarm. 1 mana rogue weapon, or rogue card. Destroy your opponent's weapon? Okay, fair enough. Is that worth a card slot? Because the alternative is to pay 2 mana and get an Acidic Swamp Ooze. And Acidic Swamp Ooze isn't good enough to run in Rogues currently, so I think I'd just pay the extra mana and have the creature, honestly. 1 extra mana, get a 3/2 body on the field. I like that. The only redeeming factor about this card is it is a spell, so it benefits from Violet Teacher, from Gadget Sand Auctioneer, and stuff like that. The Gadget Sand Auctioneer I don't think is going to be making a comeback anytime soon. And like, Violet Teacher, I don't think it's good enough to just say, oh, well, maybe I can get an extra 1/1 token with Violet Teacher. Meh. So, okay, it's kind of a fair card, but fair isn't good enough to be run. So, subpar, just overshadowed by, like, a Harrison Jones or something like that. Okay. Next up. Dominative Sabercat. 4 mana, 4/4 Hunter Minion. Has immune when attacking 1-cost minions. Okay, that's interesting. So it's a control card. Really good at smashing, I guess, things like a Silverhand Recruit, like a Leper Gnome, like Zombie Chow. Given its stats, not great, but I mean, if you're fighting those aggro decks, this could get some value out of it. Is it good enough to run, though? I feel that the card effect is a little bit niche, just to justify lowering the stats simply for that. Because, like against a Paladin, they're just going to choose over this, and then it's just like a crappy 4-drop. So, honestly, I think this should be more like a 4/5. Yeah, it makes it better than a Yeti, but we're talking about a class minion at this point. And we're also talking about Yeti as a card that's completely out of the meta because it doesn't live up to, you know, expectations. So I feel this could pretty much be a 4/5, and that being perfectly fine to include it in the game. And then for, you know, mid-range hunters or control hunters, this would be an option. It wouldn't be running aggro hunter. Probably not face hunter, because, you know, a 4-drop's just too slow to play. But a 4/5 that, you know, benefits a little bit from attacking beasts, I think that's fine. For a class card, specifically. Okay, Fungal Giant, because we need more giants in the game. We gotta just get one giant of every type. 20 mana, costs 1 less for each minion that died this game. Okay. I mean, there's a lot to say about that. Clearly says handlock to me. Though 20 minions is a lot to go down, and this would be pretty much useful in the matches that go really long into the late game. Could easily become like a, well, not easily, but in a late game could become like a 0 mana, kind of like a Molten Giant. But it would require a lot of things to have happened, and if your opponent rushes you down way too fast, you could be screwed with this. You could end up with like a 12 mana Fungal Giant in your hand when your opponent's facing lethal, and that's like you can't even play it, and it just takes up a card slot. I think that's fair. Maybe 20 minions to die to make it 0 cost is too much, though. I think maybe 16 or 18 could be fair. You'd have to test it internally. I'm not sure how many minions really die in the course of an average handlock game, but that kind of determines whether this card's good or not. Bad versus aggro, really good versus control, and overall a fairly interesting concept. I'd be fine with an addition like this to the game. It's kind of like having Frost Giant in there. Frost Giant isn't run, but you know, it's nice to have that. Maybe Inspire decks will be a thing one day, and if it does, then Frost Giant might be good. Okay, Gadget Sand Mechanic. Oh, to go back a second though, probably a really good zoo card as well, because zoos are going to have all of their own minions dying all over the place anyway. And they do run Sea Giant, so they could run Sea Giant and Fungal Giant. Okay, next up, Gadget Sand Mechanic. 4/4 for 4, Battlecry, restore a mech to full health, Inspire, add a spare part to your hand. Okay, I kind of like that, you know. Maybe you have a piloted Shredder, you restore it to a 4/3. You have a Mech Warper, you could heal it a couple points. You have like a, I think the target for this would be more like a Mechanical Yeti. And if you could heal that for 4, that'd be pretty sweet. Like as a 4/4 for 4 that heals a minion a little bit. It's kind of like the equivalent of an Earthen Ring Farseer, specifically for mech decks, which would make it fair. The Inspire effect maybe makes it playable. You know, like in Mech Mage, I could see that being run. Yeah, I could. And it wouldn't be a super OP. I mean, Tinkertown Technician is good, especially if you have the mech. It's a 4/4 for 3, which is very solid, especially given that it gives you a free spare part. But it's not like game breaking. I mean, Mech Mages don't really dominate everything. Like Secret's Paladin is probably better than them. But they are a playable deck, and I think this is a playable card in Constructed. So, fair and pretty well balanced. Next up, 5 mana, Goblin Cannoneer. Yeah, Cannoneer. 3/3, deal 3 damage. So it's a lot like Goblin Bomber, I think that's the one it's called, which is same stats, same mana cost, but that deals 4 damage to a random enemy. I think 3 damage to a specific target that can also target the face, where the Goblin Bomber can only target a random enemy minion. 3 damage directly chosen, I think that's actually better. So Goblin Bomber isn't really run in Constructed, but would this be run? Maybe. I think like in a Shadow Step Rogue, maybe you could justify this. Maybe. It's a good arena card. I'll give it that much. It's a really good arena card. And it might be worth considering for Constructed. I think it does overshadow the Goblin that deals 4 damage as a Battlecry randomly to a random enemy minion. I think this is better, just straight up. But I don't think overshadowing it is that big of a deal, because that's only really an arena card anyway. Graveborn Warrior. 4 mana, 4/3. Give a random friendly minion +1 attack. As a death rattle, though, that is too weak, because it only gives 1 mana, 1 minion, 1 attack, and it's a death rattle. And on top of that, the stats are equivalent to a bad 3-drop. Like, there are 3-drops that have pretty good Battlecry effects, like, for instance, shoot, what's the name of it? The secrets, dude. Battlecry, make your next secret free this turn 4/3 mage card. You know which one I'm talking about. That one I like a lot. You know, it's a big tempo swing, but it's not played. And I don't even think this would be played if it was a 3-drop. So, yep, it's just too weak. If it was a battle cry, it would still be too weak. Yeah, I think Dark Iron Dwarf would still be better than this. Yeah, very mediocre card. Pretty bad in Arena, even. Okay, Hippogriff. 5 mana, 4/5. Beast. If you have at least 3 beasts, and I guess this one counts, gain Wind Fury. Oh, does this one count? Like, it hits the field and then the battle cry effect triggers? If this one counts as a beast, then it's not super terrible. But having 3 other beasts on the field as a battle cry prior to this is actually really hard to pull off. If it's 2 other beasts on the field, then this is probably still bad. If it's 3 other beasts on the field before you play this, then this is trash. I think either way this card wouldn't be played, because something with just Wind Fury is going to die when it comes out. If it was Battle Cry, if you have 3 beasts on the field, gained Wind Fury and Charge, then we might be talking. But, you know, Wind Fury cards that don't do anything when they hit the field are really, really risky. Just look at Mech Shaman. It's a super inconsistent deck. They have that 3/2 Whirling Zap-O-Matic that has, you know, standard stats as a 3/2 minion, and it comes with Wind Fury for free. It's a really good super aggro card when it works, but it's not good enough to make Mech Shaman really that viable anymore. I mean, like, some people play it, maybe some people play it up to Legend, but if you were watching the Arcane Team League tournaments, then you know Mech Shaman just got its butt wrecked in almost every case because it's just a super inconsistent deck. If it dies, it's like, okay, well, you paid 5 mana for something that just gets obliterated. 5 health, I guess that's something for 5 mana, but it's just 2 weak stats to justify, because that's a really situational battle cry. Okay, next up. 4 mana, 5/5, Hired Mercenary. Give your opponent a coin. Interesting. Probably better in Arena than it is in Constructed. I think in Constructed, giving your opponent a coin is not worth gaining 1 attack over Yeti, because the coin has combo potential with, like, Violet Teachers. It could let them drop something way big that you don't want them to drop, like a Dr. Boom on turn 6. You don't want that to happen. This coin is going to backfire for you in many cases, and I just, you know, you get tempo on the board immediately because you have a 5/5, but then you lose it immediately because your opponent has a coin to play an extra card or an extra mana with. It's dangerous to play cards like this, so it's not good enough for Constructed. It would be an okay card in Arena, maybe even good in Arena. Okay, Horde Gunship. 9 mana, 7/9, yep, mech. I don't know which part of World of Warcraft this is referencing. Maybe Icecrown. Maybe when they were fighting Deathwing, because I think that took part on an airship. I never did that raid. Don't quote me on that. Anyway, Inspire. If you have 3 mechs, deal 3 damage to a random enemy. Yeah, about that. This only costs 9 mana, and you have to do the Inspire effect. This could easily be just Inspire, deal 3 damage to a random enemy, 9 mana, 7/9. It's just, you're not going to be able to get this effect off. You have to have 3 mechs on the board. Like, okay, if this was a thing, then Mimiron's Head would be played. Because Mimiron's Head is combine your 3 mechs into a 4/8, I think it is, with Mega Wind Fury, guaranteed 16 damage. And that's a 5 mana minion. You can Cold Blood it for 32 damage, instantly win the game. And that's not played at all, because it's just not viable to have 3 mechs on the board. It's inconsistent. And then on top of that, you have to be playing a 9 mana card that does nothing when it comes out. Unless you have Tharzan to knock it down in mana cost. But then you have to have Tharzan and 3 mechs. It's just not going to happen. This is going to get BGH'd. It's going to do 9 mana and do nothing. And that's not what makes a viable card. The 9/7, the new Kraken, common, good in Arena, not viable for Constructed, even though it deals 4 damage as a battle cry, guaranteed 4 damage, and it gives you a 9/7 for 9 mana. That card's actually not too bad. But that's guaranteed damage. It doesn't even require an Inspire effect or the conditional 3 mix. So this is just a trash tier card at this point. You know, even if you have 1 mech on the field, this would be bad. Even if this was just Inspire, deal 4 damage to a random enemy, it would be bad. I think if you really want Inspire and have 3 minions, this would have to be deal 10 damage to a random enemy. I don't think it would be run even then. I'd rather just have Ragnaros. Sorry, I'd just rather have Ragnaros. Okay, Infinite Dragon. 6 mana, 6/4. If you're holding a dragon, shuffle this minion into your deck as a death rattle. Okay, right. So you're thinking Malorn, and you're also thinking that your opponent doesn't silence this. And you're also thinking that you're going to fatigue, because that's the only situation where this would matter. Because the decks, how the game actually plays out is not so slow that really you fatigue that much. And you're not really fatiguing with the decks that you would play this in. You might play something like this in like a Mill Druid, but a Mill Druid doesn't have to worry about his overdrawing himself. He just has to worry about making his opponent overdraw. So I can't see a deck where this would actually be a necessary card, and therefore it's just useless because it doesn't belong in any deck. And the stats are weak. Yeah, sure, you might draw it again, but, you know, no one plays the Skeleton Knight, and that just goes straight back to your hand. And I think that might also be a 6 mana 7/4. Yeah, sure, it's a 50% because I have to win the Joust, but I think I'd argue that the Skeleton Knight is better than this, and the Skeleton Knight is really bad too. And yeah, it's a 6 mana 7/4 because you can't play it with Shadow Flame. Yep, just trash tier. Okay, next up, Jade Serpent. 6 mana, 5/6 dragon. Whenever a friendly minion dies, gain +1 attack or +1 health at random. Alright, so if you have a bunch of minions on the field like you did in Implosion, could become like a 6/6 or a 6/7 or a 5/7 or a 7/5 for 6 mana, which is mediocre. I don't see any way for Dragon decks to have a bazillion minions on the board. Maybe they have 2 or 3, but almost regardless of how you play it out, yeah, it has Chromie synergy, but very, very rarely is this ever going to be better than a Boulder Fist Ogre, which is a 6 mana, 6/7. So you're already behind 3 stats, so 3 minions have to die, and then you're maybe not even getting the stat distribution you want. Maybe you buff this up to be BGH'd. Boulder Fist Ogre isn't run. I don't see how this could be run. Requires at least 1 more HP, I think, for this to be a thing. Yeah, it should be at least a 5/7 base. Okay, Jousting Maiden, 5 mana 5/5. Battle Cry, Joust. If yours cost more, gain +1/+1, which make it a 5 mana 6/6. That's a fair card. You know, you compare it to Pit Fighter, which is just a vanilla 5 mana 5/6. But that's always a 5/6. Doesn't require a Joust. This requires winning a Joust, which means you need a deck that's very controlling, and that means you sacrifice a lot of the early game to play high mana cost minions to win the Joust. And, you know, if you get 6/6, 60% or 70% of the time because of that, that's fine. You get a little bit of a bonus for playing those high cost minions. Probably isn't good enough for Constructed, because Pit Fighter I don't think has really been played in Constructed. Though Pit Fighter's almost worth considering. But might be a pretty good arena minion. Yeah, it would be a pretty good arena minion, actually. Probably won't see Constructed play. But yeah, it's a fair card. Okay, Manted Jumper. 5/4, 3 mana. Ooh, that's pretty solid stats. Enrage, deal 3 damage to your hero. Alright, interesting. So it's sort of like a Flame Imp that, you know, it doesn't necessarily even function as a Flame Imp, because I think... No, the Enrage effect does trigger when it takes damage, even if it dies immediately. Because I remember, I think anyway, if a Amani Berserker dies straight up, it still becomes a 5/0 before dying. So this would be like a delayed Flame Imp. And taking 3 damage to have a 5/4 on the board? Yeah, I'd pay 1 mana to take... I mean, I'd I'd sacrifice 3 life for a coin at almost any point in the day. So this is a really strong aggro card. Or even just board control card. Yeah, if this was a thing, I think would be run in a lot of decks. I'm actually kind of surprised it's not a class card, because that kind of power level would justify a class card. On par with, like, Flame Imp, really. And Flame Imp is a really good zoo card, so yeah. Menacing Blackwing. Battlecry, if you're holding a dragon, deal 4 damage to the enemy hero. 6 mana, 6/5. Okay. So you're sacrificing 2 HP from Boulder Fist Ogre, and you get potential 4 extra damage on the enemy hero if you're holding a dragon, which in a dragon deck is pretty consistent. So sacrifice 2 HP on the minion to deal 4 damage to the hero. Is that worth it? Not often. Only in aggro decks, I think. Because in any kind of control deck, that 2 HP on the minion often matters more than the 4 damage on your opponent's hero. But being able to pseudo-charge the face by Battlecrying, dealing the damage, you know, in an aggro deck, that's more meaningful. It might be playable in an aggro dragon deck. And I think, Cold, I think you're going for, like, the kind of theme here, that you want there to be more types of aggro or dragon decks that work like aggro. And that's why Chromie is a thing. Now, if you play Chromie with this, you know, it becomes a 4 mana 6/5 that Battlecries deal 4 damage. That's crazy. Of course, that's kind of living the late game dream a little bit, but yeah, I could see this being a thing, specifically in dragon decks. Okay, Mind Flay, 3 mana, deal 4 damage. Priest card. Compare it to Shadow Bolt, deal 4 damage to a minion. Well, I was gonna say, like, wow, that's actually kind of broken because, you know, Shadow Bolt isn't bad, and 4 damage that can also target the hero, that's pretty good. It's like a Dark Bomb, but +1 attack, +1 mana. But really, if you think about it, Shadow Bolt isn't run really at all. Almost at all. And Warlocks is supposed to have the weaker cards because they have the stronger hero power. So actually, 4 damage as a class card for like a mage or a priest is actually fair, and priests do need more spell damage compatible cards. So this would be a card that probably sees quite a bit of play in priest. But it's actually fair. It's fair like Dark Bomb is fair. It's competitive, but not game-breakingly, oh my god, OP. In many cases, I probably actually prefer Dark Bomb to this, so I'd be fine with Priests getting this. Hooray for the idea of Priests getting more spell damage cards. They really need it. I want to see it, so I can run Azure Drake and not feel bad about it. But anyway. Yep. Pretty solid card. Okay, Mini Fizzler. Okay, it's a mech. 3 mana. Artwork makes me think Boombot. 2/1, so the battle card I can't talk. Better be pretty good. Deal 2 damage split among random enemies. Compare this with Goblin Blast Mage. Yes, Goblin Blast Mage is a class card. Specifically only works in dedicated mech decks. This does not have the requirement of having a mech to trigger. But the stats are weak, so a 2/1, you know, if it was like deal 2 damage targeted, maybe that could be sort of justified, but when I think cards that could be playable, I would think like Flame Waker, which has the potential to get me much more than 2 random free damage, and has much better health stats. Yeah, you could kind of treat this in the same vein as like a Argent Horse Rider, which is a 2/1 with charge that also has Divine Shield. And you could kind of say Divine Shield, deal 2 damage randomly. Sort of the same. In fact, in some cases this might be better than that even. So maybe I'm underrating this card, but I feel it's a little bit iffy. What's great about the Argent Horse Rider is that you are guaranteed to get the right target that you want, because you're charging and then you're picking a target. This is random damage, and maybe because it's random damage, it's actually worse than Argent Horse Rider. And besides, I think Argent Horse Rider was only really run in aggro decks, specifically because you can smork their face and they need 2 sources of damage to actually remove it. I'm not sure if this is good enough to be a control card or a aggro card. Maybe it could actually be like an aggro or Secrets Paladin card. No, maybe not Secrets Paladin because it's battle cry, not death rattle. But it would kill enemy Smorka minions pretty well. That's true. Would have to actually see it in practice. Probably an okay card in Arena. I think making this a 2/2 that has that battle cry would not be unreasonable though. Okay, shouldn't have too many cards left. Let's actually take a look here. We are on the last... Oh my gosh. Actually, we got about 23 cards left, and we're already 1 hour in. So actually, I'm going to call it here, and we will do the other 23 cards later. I didn't actually realize it took this long to get this far. I hope you guys are enjoying it this far. If you want me to, do more fan-made cards or reviews for them, just let me know. I've been Dark Skeleton. I'll see you guys later, and I'll have the part 2 for this video up pretty soon.